Marla Quinn opened the door only a crack, just enough for one sharp eye to examine us. And right then I felt that strange heaviness older men get when something is about to go wrong. My wife, Eileen, stood beside me holding her purse with both hands, and I clutched a warm casserole, still steaming even through the foil. We'd barely finished climbing the wooden porch steps. My knees were still reminding me I'm 55, not 30, and yet Marla blocked the doorway like a bouncer guarding a private club. "Clifford Hale," she said, voice flat as winter stone. "You're not coming in today. Not you. Not now. You're nobody here." She added a little shrug, as if dismissing a salesman. Not her husband's father. That word nobody settled under my ribs heavier than I expected. I've been called stubborn, loud, even old-fashioned, but never nobody. I opened my mouth to answer, but my voice didn't seem ready to come out. Eileen touched my arm gently, the way she always does when my pride takes a hit, soft enough to calm me, firm enough to keep me standing. For a moment I almost turned around, walked back to the car, pretended we'd simply picked the wrong day. But something inside me refused. Maybe it was age. Maybe it was dignity. Maybe it was just the Hale stubborn streak that runs in my family. So I steadied myself and spoke quietly, almost to remind myself I still existed somewhere in this world. "Subscribe, hit the like button, and tell me in the comments how old you are and where you're from. For you it's just a small thing, but for me, it's the reason I keep telling these stories." It came out soft, like a man trying to hold onto a small piece of warmth in the cold. Eileen stepped forward, then not aggressively, just shifting her weight. But it changed the whole air on that porch. Her voice was calm, controlled, almost too polite. "Marla," she said, "move your arm." And for the first time, Marla's confident smirk twitched. She wasn't used to anyone challenging her, but before she could answer, a voice rose from inside the house. "Our son, Rowan." His tone was annoyed, careless, and far too loud for a conversation meant to stay private. "Did they show up again? Tell him I don't want." He didn't finish, because all three of us froze. Those words cracked something open that none of us could put back. Rowan's voice, my own son's voice, hung in the air like a slap that never quite landed but still burned. "Tell him I don't want." And then silence. Heavy, awkward. The kind that makes even the floorboards seem embarrassed. Marla stiffened, trying to block the gap of the door with her whole body now, as if shoving the words back into the house would erase them. But it was too late. I'd heard enough to know I wasn't welcome. Not by accident, not by misunderstanding, but by choice. For a moment I just stood there, casserole cooling in my hands. My fingers aren't as strong as they used to be, and the dish suddenly felt like a bowling ball. I nearly dropped it, which would have been fitting. Clifford Hale defeated by green beans. I probably would have laughed at myself if my chest didn't feel so tight. Even Eileen leaned in and whispered, "Careful, Cliff," like I wasn't a grown man who used to bench press car parts for a living. Marla finally pushed the door open a little wider, not to let us in, but so she could toss a glare toward the hallway. "Rowan, keep your voice down," she hissed, though she didn't sound angry. She sounded panicked, like someone whose carefully arranged chessboard had suddenly been bumped by a stray elbow. I looked past her shoulder then and caught a glimpse of Rowan. My son, taller than me now, hair going gray at the side. She got that early, like I did. He wore a comfortable old sweatshirt I bought him last Christmas, the one he said he loved. Funny how a sweatshirt can look different the moment you realize the person wearing it doesn't want you around. Eileen took a small step forward, and I swear the whole porch felt it. "Rowan," she said softly, "did we misunderstand something?" Her voice carried that mixture of politeness and quiet heartbreak only a long-married mother can master. It made Rowan freeze in place. He tried to recover. "Mom, Dad, I didn't mean." He scratched the back of his neck, a habit he picked up from me. I winced watching it. Nothing makes a man feel quite as old as realizing his son inherited his nervous tics instead of his decency. I took a breath, but my voice came out thinner than I liked. "Son, if you didn't want us here, you could have just said so. No need to hide behind the door. I may be 55, but I can still walk away under my own power." That came out sharper than intended. Must have been the sting, Or maybe it was the casserole weighing down my arm like a brick of humiliation. To my surprise, Rowan's face softened. Guilt is a powerful chisel. He opened his mouth, closed it again, then tried once more. Dad, it's complicated. Complicated? I muttered. So is my back. But you don't see me shutting people out because of it. That made Eileen snort a tiny, involuntary laugh. She covered it with a cough. But I heard it, and even Marla's expression twitched for a millisecond, like she wasn't sure whether to stay offended or impressed by my attempt at humor. But beneath all of it, beneath the awkwardness, the tension, the casserole that was cooling fast, something was shifting. Rowan looked afraid. And not afraid of us. Afraid of what we might discover. And that fear told me one thing. We hadn't even reached the worst part yet. Rowan stepped closer, rubbing his forehead like the truth might leak out if he pressed too hard. Marla shifted beside him, arms crossed, jaw tight, clearly hoping he'd stay quiet. But guilt has a way of loosening a man's tongue, especially when his mother is staring straight at him with those steady eyes that see right through excuses. Dad, Rowan began, you and Mom always drop by without warning, and we've just been overwhelmed lately. He said overwhelmed like it was a polite napkin he could lay over an ugly stain. I tried to respond, but the casserole tray slipped in my hands again. My wrists aren't what they used to be. Age demands little payments for every year lived. The tray dipped sideways, and I barely saved it from flipping onto the porch. Careful, Rowan shouted, reaching out instinctively. It's fine, I said, regaining my grip. This casserole has survived longer trips than this family has survived arguments. That one actually pulled a surprised puff of laughter out of Eileen. But I wasn't laughing on the inside. Something about Rowan's nerves didn't feel like a simple, we're tired excuse. My son has never been a good liar. He twitches at the eyebrows first, then shifts his weight, then avoids eye contact like he's searching for exits instead of answers. Right now, all three were happening at once. I looked past him into the hallway. Shoes scattered, jackets thrown over chairs. A faint smell of something burnt, either from a candle or from Rowan's cooking, which has always tasted like charcoal dipped in regret. Then I noticed something else. A small suitcase near the wall, half-zipped. Not ours. Not something the kids would use. Something packed in a hurry. Going somewhere? I asked quietly. Marla stepped forward so quickly she nearly tripped over her own slippers. That's none of your business, she snapped. Then she realized how harsh it sounded and tried to smooth her tone. It's just storage. Storage. Sure. And my thinning hair is just adjusting to gravity. I felt Eileen shift beside me, sensing the same thing I did. A tension not coming from us, a storm forming inside their house. One they were desperately trying to keep behind that door. Rowan sighed, defeated. Dad, Mom, look, things between us and... He stopped, swallowed hard. Just give us time. That's all we ask. Time for what? I said. He didn't answer. That silence told me more than his words ever could. Something was wrong. Deeply wrong. And whatever they were hiding, it wasn't small. Before any of us could speak again, a sudden sound echoed from inside the house, something falling. Something heavy, and Rowan's face drained of color. And just like that, the real problem revealed itself. Not through words, but through fear. The thud from inside wasn't the normal kind. Wasn't a cat knocking over a lamp or a kid dropping a toy. It had weight to it, like someone stumbling hard. Rowan's eyes shot toward the hallway, wide and guilty, and Marla stepped sideways as if to block our view. Too late. Curiosity might have killed the cat, but it's kept fathers alive for centuries. I leaned a little, just enough to see past Rowan's shoulder. Look, at 55 my balance isn't perfect, lean too far, and I'm liable to greet the porch floor up close, but I managed. And what I saw wasn't dramatic, but it was telling. One of their dining chairs tipped over, a jacket in a heap, and a cup of cold coffee spilled like someone had jumped up in a hurry. Well, I muttered. Either someone fainted, or your furniture finally decided it's had enough of this household. Eileen pressed her lips together, her version of not laughing. She elbowed me lightly. The cliff, behave elbow. but I could see the corner of her mouth twitch. Even Rowan gave a shaky huff, unsure whether to be annoyed or embarrassed. Marla wasn't amused. Clifford, seriously, this isn't the time. Then when is the time? I asked. Because last I checked, parents weren't seasonal decorations you only bring out when convenient. Rowan winced. He hates confrontation. Always has. Even as a kid, he'd try to negotiate with broccoli instead of just eating it. Dad, please, he said, rubbing the back of his neck. It's just been tense around here. Tense? I raised an eyebrow. Son, your house looks like it's been hosting a tornado support group. Eileen whispered, barely audible. Cliff. What? I whispered back. A man can observe. But beneath my small attempts at humor, something cold crept along my spine. The chair, the suitcase, the whispers, the guilt, they didn't add up to a simple bad mood. Something was unraveling inside this home, and Rowan looked like a man caught in the middle of a storm he didn't know how to navigate. Then, from deeper inside, a small voice called out, Is it them? Are they still there? It wasn't one of the kids. The voice was too adult, too unfamiliar, too present. Marla's shoulders tightened. Rowan's breath stopped halfway. I knew then, truly knew, that whatever was happening wasn't just complicated. We weren't the problem walking in. We were the witnesses they feared. And whatever they were hiding, someone else inside that house was part of it. Rowan stepped in front of the hallway, like a rookie security guard trying to block a parade. Dad, Mom. Just stay outside for a minute, he stammered. The panic in his voice was so raw, it almost made me step back. Almost. At 55, I've learned that when someone tells you not to look, that's exactly when you should. I shifted my weight forward, and the old porch groaned under me like it was warning. Clifford, don't you do anything heroic, your back's not insured. I ignored it. Eileen placed her hand on my shoulder, probably to steady me. Though knowing her, she was ready to push me out of the way and march inside herself if needed. Marla was sweating now. A bead rolled down her temple, catching the light like guilt on display. It's not what it sounds like, she blurted out. Well, that's reassuring, I said, because usually, when I hear an unfamiliar adult voice in my son's home, it is exactly what it sounds like. Eileen snorted again. She pretends to be the dignified one, but she cracks more than she admits. Rowan raised both hands as if calming a wild horse. Please, just listen. We've had a guest staying over for a few days. I looked at the tipped chair, the suitcase, the spilled coffee, the whispering. A guest or a tornado with a hotel membership? Dad, not now. Son, if I don't joke, I'll start yelling, so pick your poison. Before Rowan could answer, the mystery voice approached, footsteps soft but unmistakably adult. My stomach tightened. Eileen's grip on my arm became firmer. Then a man stepped into view. Not a relative, not a neighbor. A man around Rowan's age, wearing an undershirt, holding a blanket. Looking like he had absolutely no reason to be inside my son's home on a Saturday afternoon. Oh, the man said, blinking at us. They're still here. Marla nearly fainted. Rowan shut his eyes like he was bracing for an earthquake. And I laughed. Not a joyful laugh. More like the kind you let out when life hands you something so ridiculous that your brain can't decide between rage and disbelief. Eileen gasped. Cliff! What? I said. At least now the chair makes sense. But the humor faded fast. My heart sped up in that unpleasant, older man way, not panic. Not anger, but something deeper. The quiet hurt of realizing your own child trusted a stranger in his home more than his own parents. Rowan whispered, Dad, I can explain. I looked at him, really looked. My son. A grown man sweating like a teenager caught sneaking in past curfew, and I felt something shift inside me. A line I didn't know I had suddenly being crossed. Rowan, I said softly, you will explain. Every bit of it. But not here on the porch like we're delivery drivers. I straightened my back. It popped loudly, much too loudly, but it added drama. So I pretended it was intentional. Either you open this door, I said, or your mother and I walk away. And if we walk away today, we don't come back easily. Rowan swallowed hard. Marla froze. The stranger took a cautious step back, and with a trembling hand, Rowan finally reached for the door. Everything that happened next, that would belong to Eileen's part of the story.
When Rowan finally opened that door, it felt less like an invitation and more like a confession. The house smelled of old coffee, stress, and something burnt, probably one of Rowan's attempts at cooking. Clifford stepped inside first, muttering under his breath about the floor needing refinishing. I nudged him gently. "Cliff, please, not now," he replied. "What? I can't have my final moments before a heart attack surrounded by bad carpentry." I elbowed him, harder this time. Inside, the stranger hovered awkwardly near the wall, clutching the blanket like it was a shield. He looked at me, then at Clifford, then back at me, clearly deciding which one of us was more likely to throw him out the window. Spoiler, it was me. I folded my arms and stared at Rowan, waiting. Clifford tried to match my seriousness, but it's hard to look intimidating when you accidentally step on a squeaky toy and nearly jump out of your socks. The stranger even flinched. Clifford looked down at the rubber dinosaur under his shoe and grumbled, "Why does this thing look exactly like the one I tripped over last Thanksgiving?" "Because it is the one," Rowan murmured. Clifford shot him a look. "So you can keep plastic reptiles but not your own parents?" The stranger cleared his throat. "My name is Weston." I didn't blink. "That wasn't my question." Rowan stepped in between us, like a man separating two territorial wolves. "Mom, please. Weston's staying with us temporarily. He, needed a place." "And out of all the people in your life," I said slowly, "you thought your parents were the last ones who should know?" Rowan swallowed hard. Marla's eyes darted from window to floor to Weston, like she wanted to teleport out of her own house. I looked at all three of them, my son, my daughter-in-law, and the stranger who shouldn't be here, and suddenly understood something unsettling. The fear in the room wasn't about us discovering Weston. The fear was about why Weston had been hidden. Clifford leaned close to me and whispered, "I knew something was off. When a man hides a guest, it's never the guest who's the problem, it's the reason behind him." "Cliff," I whispered back, "you don't have to narrate your detective work." "But I'm good at it," he insisted. "You once accused the mailman of stealing our hose." He looked suspicious. "He was delivering a bill." "Well, that's suspicious too." Rowan sank onto the nearest chairone of the few still upright and rubbed his temples. "Mom, Dad, I didn't tell you because Weston is going through something personal. Something difficult." I stepped closer. "Rowan Hale, if this man is in trouble, your father and I have a right to know what danger you've brought into your home, especially with the children here." Weston opened his mouth to speak, but Rowan put a hand up. "No, I'll explain. I owe you that." Clifford, standing behind me, whispered loud enough for everyone to hear, "Finally." And then Rowan looked at us with a mixture of shame and desperation. What he said next shifted the entire ground beneath our feet. Because Weston wasn't just a house guest, he was the reason our family was cracking apart from the inside. Rowan took a long breath, the kind he used to take as a boy right before admitting he broke something expensive. Except this time, what was broken wasn't a vase or a lamp, it was trust. "Weston isn't just staying with us," he finally said. "He's helping me with something." That vague sentence hung in the air like smoke with nowhere to escape. Clifford, of course, couldn't stay quiet. "Helping you? What is he, your life coach? Fitness instructor? Because if he's teaching you how to burn coffee, he deserves a refund." I shot him a look, but Weston actually nodded. "I can't cook," he admitted softly. Clifford whispered to me, "Aha, knew it." I stepped closer to Rowan, gently placing my hand on his shoulder. "Son, speak plainly." He looked at me the way he did when he was 10 and hid bad grades behind the cereal boxes. "Mom, I've been having a hard time. Work, pressure, and Marla and I have been fighting more than you know." Marla flinched, offended, and embarrassed at once. "Rowan, don't drag them into." "Marla, stop." His voice cracked. "We can't keep pretending." Silence followed. Heavy, uncomfortable. The kind that makes even the furniture seem to brace itself. I waited. Clifford also waited, but with the dramatic sighing of a man who thinks suspense should be illegal. Rowan finally continued. "A few months ago, I collapsed at work. Anxiety, stress. They sent me home with medication and a therapist's number I never called. Weston, he gestured weakly toward the stranger, is my coworker. He's been staying here to help while I get myself together. I blinked. Not the confession I expected, but not the worst one either. Clifford relaxed slightly, though he still looked ready to interrogate Weston about his credentials. So, you're a what? Support friend? Stress butler? Anxiety intern? Clifford, I hissed. What? I'm trying to learn the terminology. But Rowan wasn't done. We hid it from you because we didn't want you to think we'd failed. His voice trembled. You both built your lives from nothing. And here I am, falling apart at 53. Oh, my heart, my sweet foolish son. I cupped his cheek the way I hadn't done in years. Rowan Hale, you listen to me. Needing help is not failing. Suffering in silence is. Tears welled in his eyes, and I felt Clifford step closer behind me, quieter than usual. That meant it reached him, too. Marla folded her arms defensively. You don't understand. It's been chaos here. He's not himself. The kids are scared. I'm scared. Rowan lowered his head. I should have told you sooner. I spoke gently but firmly. You should have. We're your parents, not your landlords. Just as that truth settled between us, Clifford tried to smooth the tension with one of his attempts at humor. Well, on the bright side, at least Weston isn't here because you're starting some underground poker club. Weston blinked. Oh no, sir. I lose at poker. Terribly. Clifford nodded. Good. Then we can play later. Even Rowan laughed through his tears. But beneath that tiny breath of relief, a deeper truth stirred. Rowan getting help was good necessary, but Weston's presence, Marla's panic, the secrecy, there was still something they weren't telling us. Something bigger. Something Rowan had been trying to protect us from. Rowan lifted his head again, and though the worst of the trembling had passed, the shame still clung to him like dust on old furniture you can wipe at it, but it settles back if you stop trying. Clifford stood behind me, arms crossed, looking like a retired sheriff evaluating suspects. Weston hovered near the wall, practically blending into it. And Marla, she paced 3 steps to the left, 3 steps to the right, like a metronome set to anxiety. I sighed softly. Rowan, sweetheart, if this is about your health, then let's deal with it together. But Rowan didn't answer. Instead, he shot a glance toward Marla, and that look quiet, pleading, almost apologetic, told me there was still more left unsaid. Marla stopped pacing and planted her hands on her hips. Fine, she said, voice sharp but cracking around the edges. If we're being honest, then let's be honest. She glared at Weston. But you don't help. You make everything worse. Weston blinked. I do? Yes, she snapped. Your advice has turned my husband into a mess. Weston looked at me helplessly. Ma'am, I swear, I only told him to take breaks and drink water. Clifford whispered loudly. Scandalous. I elbowed him. Again. But then Rowan rubbed his face and mumbled, Marla, stop blaming Weston. He's not the problem. The room froze. Even Clifford straightened a little. Rowan swallowed hard, eyes glassy again. Mom, Dad, Weston hasn't just been staying here to help me. He's here because, his voice broke, because I didn't trust myself to be alone. My breath caught. Not fear, no, not that. More like the cold realization that my son had been carrying a burden far heavier than stress alone. Clifford shifted beside me, his posture softening for the first time. He'd always believed men should tough things out, but even he knew when a man was hurting beneath the surface. Marla wiped her eyes, suddenly looking small. We didn't know how to tell you. We didn't want to scare you. And we didn't want you thinking Rowan was weak. I stepped closer to my son, touching his cheek gently. Strength isn't pretending, Rowan. Strength is knowing when to ask for a hand to steady you. He leaned into my palm like he used to when he was a child just for a second, but that second was enough to unravel some of the tension strangling the room. Then Clifford, me dear, awkward, well-meaning Clifford tried to lighten the air. Well, he said, if Weston's here to keep Rowan company, maybe I should stay too. Teach the boy how real men relax. Clifford, I sighed. You relax by falling asleep in your recliner with the TV, asking if you're still watching. It's called conserving energy, he muttered. Even Rowan laughed through the tightness in his throat, and Weston cracked a shy smile. But just as relief began to slip in, Marla's expression shifted guilt, fear, something else entirely. And she whispered, barely audible, "Rowan, you didn't tell them everything." A chill rippled down my spine. Rowan's face turned pale. He wasn't done confessing, and what remained was the part he feared most. When Marla said those words, "You didn't tell them everything," the whole room seemed to tighten, like the house itself held its breath. Rowan's shoulders slumped as though someone had laid 1,000 bricks across his back. Weston took a cautious step away, as if the confession might explode and take him with it. Clifford, bless him, whispered, "Here we go," the way a man does before a carnival ride he's not sure he should have gotten on. I placed a hand on Rowan's arm. "Son," I said gently, "whatever it is, say it. We're here now." Rowan looked at Mirrally. Looked and I saw fear, shame, and exhaustion tangled together in his eyes. "Mom, Dad," he swallowed. "My anxiety didn't start because of work, or stress, or money." He hesitated. "It started because I made a mistake. A big one I didn't know how to fix." Clifford puffed out his chest like he was preparing to scold him for crashing a car or burning down a shed. "Well, Rowan, unless you accidentally joined a cult or set fire to your taxes, I'm sure we can handle it," Marla muttered. "Clifford, please." But even she cracked a tiny smile. Rowan sat down in the nearest chair and rubbed his temples. "A few months ago," he said quietly, "I loaned a significant amount of money to someone I shouldn't have trusted." My brows rose. "How much is significant?" he whispered. 22,000. Clifford choked on nothing. I patted his back while he wheezed. 22? What, dollars? Rowan winced. "Yes, Dad, dollars." "Good grief," Clifford sputtered. "For that amount, I'd better get a new spine and a year's supply of decent socks." Weston stepped forward, hands raised. "It wasn't me, I swear." I nodded. "No offense, Weston, but no one suspected you. You don't look like someone who even carries $22. He actually nodded. "That's fair." Rowan pressed on. The person disappeared, and then debt collectors started calling, then showing up at the house. Marla shivered. "They came twice when Rowan was at work. I didn't want the kids to see. I was terrified." That explained the noise, the panic, the secrecy. It wasn't shame alone, it was fear. I knelt beside Rowan, something I hadn't done since he was a boy. "Son, why didn't you come to us? We've survived lean years, layoffs, broken cars, surprise bills. We would have helped you." His eyes filled with tears, because I already felt like a disappointment. And I didn't want to walk into your house asking for money like some burden you never signed up for. My heart cracked. "Rowan Hale, listen carefully," I said, gripping his hand. "You are never a burden. You are our child. That never ends. Even when you're 53 and graying like your father." Clifford huffed. "For the record, this is my natural distinguished silver." I rolled my eyes. "Cliff, your barber told you it's called premature dulling." Rowan laughed through his tears, and even Marla relaxed enough to sit down. But though Rowan had finally spoken the truth, one problem still loomed. Those debt collectors weren't going to magically disappear. And unlike Rowan, Clifford and I weren't afraid of them. In fact, the moment we understood what had been haunting our son Clifford, stood taller, cracked his knuckles and said, "Well then, let's pay these gentlemen a visit." And that's when the real turning point began. Clifford's words, "Let's pay these gentlemen a visit," lingered in the room with the same boldness he used when declaring he could fix any appliance with duct tape and a bit of grit. Rowan blinked at him, horrified. "Dad, no, these guys aren't friendly." Clifford waved a hand. "Son, I survived the 70s, and your grandfather's temper. I can handle a couple of underpaid collectors." Before Rowan could protest, Clifford marched toward the door with the swagger of a man who forgot he has two bad knees. I followed quick, partly to support him, mostly to prevent him from accidentally starting a small street war. Weston looked terrified, Marla looked hopeful, and Rowan just looked exhausted. We stepped outside and Clifford immediately stopped, gripping his lower back. "All right, give me a second. Dramatic exits require proper spinal alignment." "Cliff, for heaven's sake," I sighed. "What?" "I can't intimidate anyone if I'm crooked." Once his alignment had been reset through a series of questionable stretches, and one alarming crack we walked to our car. Rowan trailed behind, pleading, "Please don't make it worse." "We're not," I said. "We're making it right." The debt collectors were parked down the street in a beat-up sedan with tinted windows, the universal uniform of people who want to look important on a budget. Clifford approached with the same confidence he once used on school principals when Rowan got into small trouble. My husband has always been impressive when he believes he's in charge. Unfortunately, he also believes he's in charge most of the time. The collectors rolled down the window, giving us the practiced glare of men who rehearse intimidation in bathroom mirrors. Clifford leaned in slightly. "Afternoon, gentlemen. Lovely weather for harassing my son." The taller one squinted. "Who are you?" "I," Clifford said proudly, "am the man who raised him, and the man who remembers exactly how to deal with people who think fear is a skill." I stepped beside him, offering a polite smile, the kind that unsettles people more than a threat. "My son made a mistake. He will pay what he owes, but you will stop scaring his wife and children. If you need to call, you call us." The shorter man frowned. "And who exactly are you supposed to be?" I kept smiling. "The woman who doesn't tolerate bullies," Clifford added. "And she's scarier than I am." "That's true," I admitted. The collectors exchanged glances. Then the taller one, sensing, perhaps, that aging parents with nothing left to fear are the most dangerous creatures alive, cleared his throat. "Fine. We can arrange a different contact, but the debt will be handled," Clifford said firmly. "You don't show up at their door again." And just like that, the tension broke. The sedan rolled away, leaving only the hum of tires on cold pavement. When we returned to Rowan's house, he looked at us with a mixture of shock and relief. "You didn't have to do that," he whispered. Clifford shrugged. "Son, we raised you for 30 years. We can handle a conversation with two men who wear sunglasses in the shade." I took Rowan's hands. "We're here, not to judge, not to scold, to help. That's what family is." Marla slowly approached, tears finally slipping down her face. "I'm sorry," she said weakly, "for pushing you away, for everything." I hugged her gently. Fear makes people do strange things, but now we move forward. Weston stepped forward nervously. "Should I still stay?" Clifford grinned. "Only if you're cooking dinner. Rowan's meals taste like burnt ambition." Rowan groaned. "Dad." But he was smiling, really smiling for the first time in months. That evening, we all sat together in the living room, the children eventually running in and climbing into our laps as though nothing strange had ever happened. And maybe that was the clearest proof of all. Love endures. Even through fear. Even through mistakes. Even through secrets. Before we left, Rowan hugged me tightly. "Mom, thank you," I whispered into his shoulder. "You'll never carry anything alone again. Not while we're still here." And as Clifford and I walked out into the cool night air hand in hand, he murmured, "You know, for people who aren't welcome, we sure fixed a lot today." I nudged him. "Cliff, hush." But he wasn't wrong. We came to that house unwanted. We left it necessary. And our son, lost in his own storm, finally found shelter again. Because family, when it stands together, doesn't break. Not even under the weight of fear, shame, or strangers in the hallway.